Well, welcome to the Bartlett Planning Commission meeting, May the 3rd, 7 o'clock. We'll please call to order. We're going to have an opening prayer followed by Pledge of Allegiance. Our opening prayer will be Jack Young.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Lord, thank you for the opportunity we have to get back together here, God. I pray that you would watch over and protect us and our families. Grant us wisdom, Father, for the things that we're going to consider this evening. Watch over and protect those who aren't with us, God, for whatever reason. And I pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the
United States of America
and to the republic for
which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes? If so, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Move we approve.
Do you hear a second? I got a first and a second. Let's begin the moment. You call the roll. Call the vote on the minutes.
Casper Briggs.
Yes.
Jake Hoffman.
Yes.
John Conroy.
Yes.
Paul Kaiser.
Yes.
Jim Lamb.
Yes.
Curtis Sigler.
Yes.
Joe Walker.
Yes.
Jack Young.
Yes.
Mandy Young is absent. Motion carries.
Okay, minutes approved. Kim, if you'll introduce the final plan for Appling Pleasant subdivision.
Mr. David Bray with the Bray firm, on behalf of the property owners at 7553 Memphis Arlington Road, is requesting Planning Commission approval of a minor two-lot subdivision final plan. The subject property is located within the RS-12 residential single-family zoning district. That RS-12 means the minimum lot size has to be 12,000 square feet. The lot is currently 1.46 acres in size, and it was created by warranty deed in 1959. There is currently an existing house on the property that is situated on the lot closer to Memphis Arlington Road. Lot 1 of the subdivision will be 30,397 square feet, while Lot 2 will be 25,419 square feet. Lot 1 has existing, or the current lot, has existing access from both Memphis Arlington Road and Appling Road, and that will be Lot 1, the access for Lot 1. Lot 2 will have access from Appling Road. Staff has reviewed the plan and recommend approval with the conditions that are listed in your staff reports.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions from the commissioner for Kim before we introduce the applicant? Seeing none, is the applicant present? You just state your name and address for the record, please.
David Bray with the Bray Firm, 2950 Stage Plaza North.
And have you looked at the conditions of staff?
We have, and we're in agreement with them.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the commissioners for the applicant? Seeing none, do I hear a motion?
I'll motion to approve. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Move approval.
Okay.
And I'll second.
Okay.
And Leslie, if you call the vote on that.
Alderman Young. Yes. Joe Walker.
Yes.
Curtis Sigler.
Yes.
Jim Lamb.
Yes.
Paul Kaiser.
Yes.
John Conroy.
Yes.
Jake Hoffman.
Yes.
And Casper Briggs.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Leslie. The motion carries. Kim, if you'd like to introduce the Kurt subdivision, please.
Again, Mr. David Bray is here with us tonight with the Bray firm on behalf of the property owners of 3869 Appling Road and is requesting Planning Commission approval of a minor two-lot subdivision final plan. This property is located within the RS-12 residential single-family zoning district. Again, the RS-12 means a minimum 12,000 square foot lot in this district. A portion of this property was recorded as the one-lot Gilbert Road subdivision in May of 1969. Over time, the lot lines were adjusted by deed to reconfigure the lot to include an adjacent lot that was not a part of the Gilbert Road subdivision. We believe that this was done to accommodate a pool. The applicant would like to now officially subdivide the lot to reconfigure it into a two-lot subdivision, with Lot 1 being 49,882 square feet and Lot 2 being 13,884 square feet. Both lots will have access from Appling Road. Staff has reviewed this application and recommend approval with the conditions that are listed in your staff reports.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions for Kim from the commissioners? Seeing none, would you like to introduce the applicant? Come forward, please. If you'll state your name and again for the record, if you will, please.
David Bray with Bray Firm, 2950 States Plaza
Thank
North.
you. You agree with the conditions of staff?
We do.
Thank you, sir. And any questions to commissioners?
David, real quick, just curious. The north line of Lot 2 has got that angle point in it. Any particular reason why?
Believe, and I can't read at that distance, and I'd have to go back to looking at it, but I think that was to meet the building width requirements at the building line.
Okay.
There's some existing fencing in there that they wanted to tie to back at the common corner from 1 and 2, which was sort of setting the back of where the owner wanted that, but we had to meet that requirement for the frontage.
Gotcha.
And you got that odd angle there, so the distance doesn't really reflect the perpendicular width. So,
Any other questions?
Chairman, is the expectation they're going to try to put a house on that second lot?
I'm sorry.
Is the expectation they're going to try to put a house on that second lot?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I believe the owner is anxious to sell that lot for somebody that's going to buy it and build a house, and that will pay off hers, and she'll be able to retire. Specifically, that's her plan.
Good for her.
Any other questions? Seeing none, do I hear a motion?
I move we approve.
Do you have a second? We got first and a second. Let's you'll call the vote.
Casper Briggs.
Yes.
Jay Kaufman.
Yes.
John Conroy.
Yes.
Paul Kaiser.
Yes.
Jim Lamb.
Yes.
Curtis Sigler.
Yes.
Joe Walker.
Yes.
And Alderman Young.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Les. The motion carries. Thank you. And moving on to discussion item. Kim, would you like to introduce that to us?
Mr. Dean Carlson with Carlson Consulting Engineers, on behalf of his client, requested that this item be brought before you tonight as a discussion item. Mr. Carlson has met with staff with a potential layout for a new townhome development that will be located on the west side of Bartlett Boulevard, adjacent to the Bartlett Townhome development. This particular property, back in May 2010, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen granted a special use permit for a nursing home, and there were also future plans to potentially have a townhome development on the property as well. The special use permit did get approved. The property had a bit of contention from the adjacent residential neighbors, being that they did not want North Street to tie into Bartlett Boulevard. This is also an area of flooding. It is adjacent to the Harrington Creek area. The applicant, the layout for the property, the applicant would like to do the opposite of the layout of the Bartlett townhomes, whereas the garages would front Bartlett Boulevard versus having a driveway to the rear of the development with the garages facing Harrington Creek. And I know the Bartlett townhomes, the garages do face the rear, and they do not front on Bartlett Boulevard. There is also a landscape plan along the frontage of Bartlett Road, along with about a 4-foot tall brick fence. And staff looked at this, and we were recommending that a similar design be done to this development as well.
Thank you, Kim. Is the applicant here and would like to discuss this with the commission?
Good evening. My name is Dean Carlson. I'm with Carlson Consulting Engineers, 7068 Ledgestone Commons, Bartlett, Tennessee. Greet you on behalf of Troy Valenti with Valenti Development in Birmingham, Alabama. He was planning on joining by Zoom tonight, but when the meeting got changed to a live meeting, he had a conflict in scheduling to get over here, so he could not make it. I do want to thank you for your time and your consideration just as this discussion item tonight. As Kim said, the main purpose of the discussion item is to really discuss the orientation of the buildings. And I do want to note one thing. I think in the staff report that perhaps incorrectly described this, the backs of these buildings will not face Bartlett Boulevard. We want the front of the homes to face Bartlett Boulevard. The garage doors and driveways will be on the front of the building as a traditional home would be, as opposed to being on the rear, which is what the townhouses existing development to the north are. I believe these went out in your packets, and this is the front elevation of the proposed homes. These are townhomes. We're proposing a total of 10 buildings, 4 units per building. So 40 residences on a total of about 17 acres. So it is, it's a very sparsely open, developed area. The main reason for this, wanting to do it in this manner, is because townhouse developments that our developer has been involved in do better when they more closely resemble a traditional neighborhood where the front of the home faces the road, the driveway and the garage is on the front of the building, and you walk out your back door to some form of backyard. In the townhouse development, the existing development to the north of us, the front of the buildings face Bartlett Boulevard, but there is only minimal sidewalk access to the front doors. I would venture to guess they very seldom, if ever, get used. As you go out the back of those buildings, the only thing that you're met with is the garage behind you, the driveway for the garage, and the private road behind it, and then another building on the opposite side of the road. You have literally no backyard. What our developer would propose to do is, as I said, a more traditional arrangement where your front of your building is facing Bartlett Boulevard, your driveway is on the front, and as you come out the back of that building, you can have a patio, a grill, a backyard, a place to let your kids play, turn out the dog, a place to walk, and actually have green space behind you, a considerable amount of green space behind you, as opposed to having to cross a road and a driveway and a garage in order to get to any green space. So that's the main reason for the difference in this, is because of that. And we've understood the staff's comments that their concern is the line of cars if they're in people's driveways that would be visible from Bartlett Boulevard. And to try to soften that approach, you can see we've rendered a number of really all of the proposed homes. They sit approximately 75 to in excess of 100 feet off Bartlett Boulevard, separated by a landscape buffer, which we would plant with berms and landscaping to help hide those cars, those elevations. And then you also have the private drive that we would be building that these driveways would actually front on. None of the driveways would come directly out onto Bartlett Boulevard. They would come out onto to the private road. I would note that as a townhouse development, these are similar to condominiums where if you purchase a unit, what you're actually purchasing is your floor plan, your residence. Everything outside of the buildings, the driveways, the private streets, all the landscaping, the buffer behind the houses, would be owned and maintained by a homeowners association, so it wouldn't be a single ownership. We feel that this is a far more attractive presentation to the city rather than having the backyards, the backs of those buildings. We feel that it's more palatable and will be more saleable for our developer if he can present this as a traditional neighborhood to prospective buyers with backyards that would be an amenity to those potential homeowners. So what we're requesting is just generally an agreement with this orientation so that we can move into the actual construction plans that will be needed for the formal submittal, hopefully in about a month.
This is kind of an open forum, just so everybody will kind of understand. We haven't done this in a while, so any questions commissioners have, we'll just kind of go back and forth. It's kind of a working type of committee.
I've got a question. We saw 3 or 4 different renderings of what you call the front yard.
Yes, sir.
There are no renderings of what you would call the backyard.
No, sir. We didn't try to render those just simply because they are so far separated from Harrington Creek and those neighbors. The nearest home on the west end is about, I think, 95 feet from the top of bank of the creek. And as you get further to the north, you're well in excess of 100.
But that still doesn't explain why there's nothing, you can't see what the back of the building looks like. If it were to be reversed, what would it look like from Bartlett Boulevard, I guess is my question.
Well, I think that elevation could be made to look attractive. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that it's not so much just the presentation of the back of the buildings, but then what is in the back of the buildings, people's grills along Bartlett Boulevard, whatever is in their backyards. And I think this is a more attractive presentation. Plus, the backyard will be pretty small if we do it that way because we have to keep the separation on the front of the homes from Harrington Creek that was worked out with engineering to create a buffer for Harrington Creek. So we can't push the houses closer to Harrington Creek and give a big backyard along Bartlett Boulevard. So again, it's losing what is really a potential amenity for this site is to have those big backyards, a place for people to come out onto. It's not so much just the elevation and what it might look like from Bartlett Boulevard, but sort of the clutter that could exist or will exist in a backyard.
But is there a way? Well, let me just say it this way. Before I would vote to approve anything, I want to see what the back of the building looks like. I mean, and I can't imagine if you've done a drawing of the buildings, you don't know what the back of the building looks like.
Well, the back of the building, again, it wasn't of a concern. We certainly can provide a rendering on the back of the building. It wasn't for that. And certainly this will go before you all again and to the DRC, no doubt. But again, the orientation of the building is what, to us, we were trying to get feedback from the commission on is can we proceed with the front of the buildings facing Bartlett Boulevard, and certainly we can address the back of the renderings with renderings. We can certainly present those to you, but the orientation of the buildings was really our concern, so the back of the buildings, the backyards can be usable to Harrington Creek.
All right, Mr. Chairman. Okay. Dean, I drove by here tonight coming and you know, soccer games are going on right now, and there are cars parked in Bartlett Boulevard along the street, okay? Sure. So I understand the concern of staff concerning the parking on the other side of the street, but we already have a problem with overflow sometimes during the soccer games. Tonight there was. My opinion is that with the garages in the front, and the way the drawing looks, it just makes it more attractive and also allowing for the backyard. And I think what you talked about sellability is it makes it a lot easier to sell the daggum thing if you have a backyard versus pavement.
And that is our developer's contention as well. He will have an easier time selling these, being able to develop it to a better price point, put more into the home and ask more for it if he can have that backyard.
With that being said, also, I don't think it would look bad if you had that brick wall going along Bartlett Boulevard like it is on the other side. It's only about 3 feet tall or something like that. I think that would be attractive. That also give a buffer between somewhat. What am I trying to say? Be a buffer between that and the house.
I think that we can present that to the developer and see perhaps there's a way we can work that into the berm as well, so it's not just a continuous brick wall, but to have sections, or perhaps a different type of material. That would be agreeable to the city as well. Perhaps there's something else we could do. So it wouldn't have to be just a continuous landscape planting, but some form of fencing wall interspersed with that.
Has there been any consideration for a second entrance or exit? Inevitably, that's going to get blocked, and that's going to make somebody mad. And, why in the world would they approve something with just one entrance and exit for potentially 80 cars? If there's, 40 units there, and 2 cars to a unit, that's going to get congested. And that's not an easy place to get in and out of, I don't think, particularly.
If we have not discussed with engineering a second curb cut, we have not tried to approach that at all. We would not be opposed to a second curb cut.
Just say something to that.
I would just like to mention that we don't have a problem with the house themselves fronting Bartlett Boulevard. It's the garage. And what we've noticed over time with the Bartlett townhomes, even though the garages are oriented to their rear drive, the garage doors over time have changed, where you've got a hodgepodge of different styles of and paint colors of garage doors. So that was one of the issues, and we were thinking that, they could have a drive that backs up. There won't be another row of townhomes in back of those homes, like the Bartlett townhomes. They're stacked. They're rows of townhomes, where this is just one straight line of row of townhomes. So you'll still have the rear yard view, but it would be, of course, the garage would be blocking some of that view.
Another inlet there? Could they, as far as the other curb cut, is that a possibility?
That would be an engineering question.
There's no contours I can see here, so off the top of my head, I don't know what that site is. That's really coming up. We have to look at that.
She would need contours in order to determine that. Yeah.
Would you repeat what she said?
She can't.
Would you all mind taking the mask off? I can't decipher what you're saying.
I'm going to leave mine on, but I did say that if we would need contours so we could look at the site distance, because you are approaching a hill over there with the bridge. So I don't know what the possibility would be for another inlet. Right now we have it lined up on the road across the street. So, off the top of my head, I don't know. We could look at it.
Yeah, that's not something that we've discussed yet. It's something we could discuss. The traffic on Bartlett Boulevard is going to be one of the biggest concerns, particularly also with the traffic from the park in Vinson. So something we could look into. But it is a very congested area. So we haven't looked at a second entrance yet. So.
I did hear some discussion about connecting North Street to this drive. So is that something that we would entertain?
Probably not, because in 2010, the developer wanted to do that, and there was a lot of contention from the neighbors, those single-family neighbors. And that part was eliminated from the special use permit as a requirement.
So it wasn't done because the neighbors on North Street decided they didn't want it cut through?
There were several neighbors from that whole neighborhood that did not want that cut through.
See, and I have the same question because it looks like it was designed and developed to
Correct.
do that with a cold, with a pipe under the grass to so that water would still flow there in Harrington Creek and still allow you to cross over.
Yes, the stub was designed for the cut through, but it was pretty much eliminated with the special use permit to actually pull that through. But, that is also a site for flooding. It's a floodway area up to a certain point. I think where most of the proposed townhomes are, that's like the edge just outside of that floodway. I believe Mr. Carlson found an undersized box culvert that may have some issues as far as part of the flooding problem. So, that was not the only issue with that. There was a lot of other controversy about getting that special use permit, but that was one of the main points of contention at that time.
This is red. Water's going to do what water's going to do. We've done everything we can. It's not going to flood. Then we get the 500-year rain, and those places get flooded. Who is, somebody's going to pay for this. The developer's, not that he's going to go anywhere, but is long gone. He's signed off on it. Well, the Planning Commission approved it. Let's sue the city of Bartlett. What happens at that point? They sue us. I know that's a downer, but
that's a hard argument to make, but people will make it. You can impose conditions, reasonable conditions, that will help alleviate that. And if we do it, then we shouldn't have liability.
So one of the things I was concerned about the berm, because anytime you have a berm there, that's a natural barrier against water. And like you said, just because you're not outside a 100-year floodplain doesn't mean it's not going to flood. I mean, pretty much anybody in Tennessee, pretty much anybody in this county can get flood zone X and the anticipating community can get flood insurance. There's a reason for that.
We have actually spent a number of months in flood studies on Harrington Creek with Rick McClanahan, with the state of Tennessee, looking at the flood maps and analyzing what could happen along that channel. The berm that we're talking about would run parallel to the road, so it's not perpendicular to it. So as such, the water doesn't get up to the road anyway. It doesn't get up that far. Now we don't want to pinch down the creek anymore, and that's why I said we can't slide those houses back. And this was kind of where the positions ended up with Rick and with the state of Tennessee with TDEC as an acceptable location. Now we've got some latitude in that, a little bit here or there, but this is what we generally agreed upon would work for the flooding conditions. And Rick's not here. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think we went the and then some. We didn't just look at a FEMA map and say this is what it is. We tried to think of every possible way to look at this to not only protect the developer, protect the development, but also to protect the city, because that was also paramount on Rick's mind when he reviewed it.
Earthwork is not cheap. Earthwork is not cheap. Would it not be better just to build a brick wall in front of it, like the one down the street? Is that really just a no-go, or what's your thoughts on that?
Because of flooding concerns?
Well, I'm saying the berm is expensive. Regardless of the flooding issue, it's still expensive. Is it not better just to put a brick wall, forget about the berm, and just put a brick wall all down the front of that?
The berm, no-go? Well, I guess a couple of things. The berm and landscaping, in my opinion, will provide a greater visual buffer for the driveways and the cars parked in those driveways, which was the whole issue here of the orientation of the buildings, of the garages. Now, if we take out the berm, take out a large percentage of that landscaping and just put a 3-foot high brick wall along there, we can do that. I don't know if it'd be more or less money, but I don't think it would provide as good of a visual buffer as what the berm and landscaping will provide. I think it will provide less.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that from commissioners?
Well, yeah, I'm opposed to the brick wall. I like the rendering and the way it's shown. But the only other comment I've got is I would recommend we connect the street in the back to the Bartlett Boulevard.
The street there, it's going to be private. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is it going to be gated?
At this point in time, it's not proposed to be gated, no.
All right. The reason I ask that, and perhaps even make a suggestion, is we mentioned already earlier this evening the overflow parking from the soccer park. So you know where they're going to be looking. So they're going to be, most people are going to jump either down, I don't know if that's Vincent right there, or into the proposed street here. My question is, it looks just from scale and eyeball right here, the road itself looks pretty narrow with a cul-de-sac at each end. How does that and the idea is, we talked about 2 cars per unit of, parked in the driveways or in the garage, et cetera. How does it accommodate guests parking? Let's just say a Super Bowl Sunday or something. Just, throwing that out there. There really isn't that I can see, a location for, additional parking. Your standard residential neighborhood here, you can park a car on the street, it's really not an issue. But here it looks to be that the road looks awfully narrow. How do you accommodate the additional parking without creating a traffic or even a safety hazard if fire has to get in there or something to that effect? That's one question. My second question for you is, we talked about the backyard. Obviously, it's got issues with flooding. What is the intention or plan right now for the backyard in terms of, right now we're looking at a lot of trees, we're looking at a good existing visual buffer with the neighborhood behind it, but I'm assuming construction is going to eliminate a considerable amount of those trees. I don't know what the plan is for the backyard, but is there any screening that will be planned right now between the backyard and the residential units behind there?
Could I ask a question along with that, please? I thought I read someplace in here where the reason why the creek overflooded was the drain was not big enough. Am I referring to something else?
It's a combination of factors. There's actually not one easy, quick, here's what's causing the flooding. So if we took out the box culvert, the flooding would be resolved. It's a channel that carries a lot of water. Right now, we know that it gets out of its banks in the 100-year storm. It will continue to get out of its banks in the 100-year storm. One of the things that goes along with that, to the question about the buffering in the back, and I can address that, one of the things that Rick McClanahan is requiring is that as we fill for a portion of these houses to elevate them up above the floodplain, that the excavation for that come from the area between the creek and the back of the house, so that effectively the soil to fill this pad is pulled from behind that pad, generally speaking. So it maintains or actually increases the floodplain area behind those houses. It's not a code requirement, it's not a FEMA requirement that it do that way, but that was one of the things that Rick wanted to, again, help provide additional protection for the city in the event that anyone did make a complaint. So a lot of those trees, especially in that, I'll say the southern half, will be removed as a virtue of that excavation requirement. As you get to the north, the northern three to four structures are actually outside of the 100-year floodplain. So they don't need to have that same excavation from behind to fill that pad. So a lot of those trees in that northern portion of it will remain. But the ones coming down up to at least the top of bank, a lot of those will be removed, just depending upon how much excavation we have to pull out of there to lift those pads up. As far as anything proposed to replace those, to fill that in, hasn't been specifically discussed. We don't want to get in the channel, of course. We want to stay out of that channel so it can carry as much of the flood water as it possibly can. But planting above the top of bank, that could be done.
And just to follow up on the question, could you address the parking?
The parking on the street. One of the things we had discussed with the developer, not to increase the width of the streets because he does not want to encourage the on-street parking, but to expand the cul-de-sacs on both the north and south end to provide parking fields beyond the radius that's required for the cul-de-sac to provide overflow parking. And I think that's the best way to do it and not encourage parking on the street.
Dean, if I could ask a couple questions. One is that looking at Neal Drive, has it been looked at to share that drive? Neal Drive being yeah, it won't show on a TV screen, but it's where the other townhouses are.
Would you pull that mic closer to you?
Okay. If you look at Neal Drive as you come in to where the existing townhouses are,
Yes.
there is an actual, the curb is cut to allow a driveway to go east there. And I'm kind of like, I'm leaning towards staff's recommendation that if the drive was in the back with the garages behind the buildings, you could come through and use Neal Street and then turn left. That's my question. Has anybody talked to the owner of that property? I'm going to assume, I don't know, that there may already be a cross-access agreement with that drive. And the only reason I say that is because of the way the curb cut is.
We did not approach that landowner. We wouldn't be opposed to a connection to that drive, but we did not approach them because it is a private drive. We didn't see anything in the title work on our parcel that led us to believe that there was an access easement existing that gave us the right to connect to it. And I would add just one more thing as far as flipping these to put the road and the garage in the back. And I would just ask all of the commissioners to think, would you want to come out your back door into nothing but pavement, have to walk down the driveway across a 25, 30-foot wide road before you can get to grass? And the answer is probably not. Most people don't want that.
In a typical subdivision, I'd agree. But if you go up and down Bartlett Boulevard here, no one has a driveway off of Bartlett Boulevard. All of their backyards are pretty much abutting that road. Because again, they're in a typical subdivision. This is a little bit different situation.
Well, we wouldn't, to be clear though, our driveways wouldn't access Bartlett Boulevard, so I want to make that clear. They would access the private street. But as you drive around town, certainly you will see traditional neighborhoods. Most of them, you see the garage door and the driveway from the road that it fronts onto.
Sure, I agree.
And again, it's not even just a matter of what do you see, it's what as a person do you want to live, how do you want to live? Do you want to be able to come out your back door onto grass, have a patio, have a rear yard for the kids, for your dog? And the answer is yes. I think most everyone would agree they do.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the idea of seeing cars as you drive by just does not seem to be a giant deal to me. We see that everywhere we drive through Bartlett. We see cars parked in front of their houses or in their driveways. So this would be no different. Another consideration, I think, is what's the speed limit, 40? There ain't a lot of people going 40. Many are going 45. You're going to see a whole lot less of the cars in the driveways going 45 than you are going 25 and maybe in your own neighborhood. The thing that seems to me, this is obviously a very difficult piece of property, or somebody would have built something on it by now. And here we're looking at 40, I'm going to say probably pretty high price units. Does the developer have any idea of unit prices on these houses?
He has not set a unit yet. He wanted to get through a unit price yet. He wanted to really get through this meeting to know what he was going to do with these houses, honestly.
Nevertheless, they're going to be pretty pricey houses. I think we can say that. It'll just be a nice addition to the tax base. It's a tough piece of property, and I think there ought to be some accommodation to a developer trying to work with something that's this difficult.
Another follow-up question. We was talking about, each town, I guess there'll be 20 townhomes total. So each townhome,
40 units total.
40. I'm sorry. So, okay. So 40. How many square feet each one of those 40 would be?
They vary from about 1,300 to 1,600, I believe, is the square footages.
Okay. Thank you.
And one of the other things I want to make sure or see for sure is that they are sold, not rented. We don't want to create an apartment complex.
Agreed. I don't, well, first of all, the intent of this, and all I can tell you is the intent of this is he wants to sell units. Now, there would not be a prohibition from, if you buy one unit, you can't buy any more in that complex. That was not part of his proposal. So if you wanted to buy your unit and the one next to you, you would have the ability to do that. The intent is not to create an apartment complex where one person owns and then rents everything. Beyond that, I don't really know how to answer that question.
I really don't. I don't have an objection to the front-facing garages, things like that. But I really would emphasize when you get down to the landscaping, the berms and a dense landscaping plate in the front. Attractive, obviously, seasonal. Perhaps some fencing. Nothing heavy though. Not site-proof fencing, but I really would emphasize, using the advantage of the berms and the thick landscaping to cut through for that site on the cars and the garages. But all in all, I think it's a pretty good plan.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners?
I wish the developer well. I hope it works. I'm all for increasing the tax base in our fair city.
Any other questions from commissioners?
And I'll just say, Dean, again, I like the layout and everything, but I would try to see if you can get a second entrance and exit to this development.
Second entrance.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Ken, would you like to add anything? Okay, give you the last word.
No, I just appreciate your time, appreciate your consideration. We really do want to move forward with this development. The developer's anxious to try to break ground as soon as possible. And obviously, if we have positive feedback tonight, we're going to start on construction plans and present to the Planning Commission as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other discussion items today? Seeing none, we adjourn.